The NATO Secretary General and the Estonian Prime Minister holding a joint news conference during a visit to Estonia's Tapa military base. Listen in.
A fundamental change of policies across the democratic world, all in support of Ukraine and aimed in isolating the aggressor. Some of them seemed even unthinkable a few days ago. NATO needs a forward defense strategy. NATO should be prepared to defend the most vulnerable part of NATO, which is the Baltic countries. And this includes, on land, establishing permanent increased forward presence, in air, establishing a credible defense posture, and a sense of urgency in developing NATO's upgraded defense plan. At the same time, we need to continue our urgent support to Ukraine. Military aid is critical here. Estonia will continue with support as we provide significant military, financial and humanitarian aid. We cannot stop until we have stopped Putin. This is what we simply must do for ending the brutal violence and destruction and for helping the brave people of Ukraine. And Ukraine should be given a very clear signal to join the EU. The security of Ukraine is the security of Europe. Although there is no direct military threat at our borders, NATO must take a leap now and adopt rapidly to the new security situation. We must move from forward presence to forward defense and from air policing to air defense. I welcome the decisions already taken to strengthen the defense here. We are today in Tapa where we can witness the real collective efforts and commitment of NATO. I would like to thank the United Kingdom and all the allies who are already present here in Estonia and also sending additional troops to the Baltic region. We must work together to help Ukraine and to strengthen our own defense. Thank you.
Thank you. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Kaya. Thank you for your welcome. Great to see you, Jens, and great to be here again in Tapa, this very, very important mission. NATO is perhaps unique in the history of defensive alliances because it has stood for over 70 years, not for aggression, but for peace and stability. And during those years, the alliance has been tested many times in the Cold War, in the Balkans, in Afghanistan. This matters because the world has become a more dangerous and a more contested place. A few short days ago, we all stood witness to scenes we hoped we would never see again on the continent of Europe. A sovereign, democratic people fighting for their lives against a foe who wishes to subjugate them by force. As we realize the terrible extent of President Putin's ambitions, the world has been rightly united in praise for the valor and bravery of the Ukrainian people, led by President Volodymyr Zelensky. And I expect, like colleagues here, I've had the privilege of speaking to President Zelensky virtually every day since the Russian invasion, and I've heard firsthand his sheer determination that the freedom his people have experienced must never be snatched away. And indeed, it's clearer day by day from the way the Ukrainians are responding that President Putin has made a disastrous miscalculation. His troops have not been welcomed into Ukraine as he prophesied, and instead the Ukrainians have mounted an astonishing and tenacious resistance. We, as the international community, have a responsibility to do everything we can to help the Ukrainians in their efforts. And that's why the UK has trained 22,000 members of the Ukrainian armed forces and why we've provided further defensive military support to Ukraine. And we have a responsibility to all Ukrainians. That's why the UK has provided £140 million in humanitarian aid to Ukraine and to the region. It's why we've deployed both humanitarian experts and hundreds of military logistics experts to Ukraine's neighbours to help them shelter those seeking sanctuary on their shores. And It's why we've announced the first phase of a bespoke humanitarian route for the people of Ukraine to come to the UK. It's also why, alongside allies across the world, the UK has swiftly executed the biggest package of sanctions ever imposed against a G20 nation. And we've seen organisations from banks to oil companies to football leagues to singing competitions who've made it clear that Vladimir Putin and his regime must be isolated from the international community for his actions. As we support the people of Ukraine, we must also shore up our shared resilience, both to protect our people and our values. These are nothing more than defensive measures, which have been the essence of NATO for more than 70 years. And I want to be crystal clear, finally, on that point. We will not fight Russian forces in Ukraine, and our reinforcements, like these reinforcements here in Tapa, are firmly within the borders of NATO members, and they are profoundly the right thing to do. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Secretary General Stoltenberg, please.
Prime Minister Kallas, Prime Minister Johnson, dear Kaya and dear Boris, it's great to be with you here at Tapa. It's great to be back, and we are here to meet the soldiers that are defending Estonia, our alliance and our values. These soldiers are keeping our nation safe and free, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. Thank you to Estonia for hosting our battle group so well and being such a staunch NATO ally. And let me also thank the United Kingdom and you, Boris, for leading this NATO multinational battle group here at the Tapa base in Estonia, and for doing so for the last 5 years. And also for doubling your contribution over the last few weeks with more British troops coming to Estonia. This really makes a huge difference and demonstrates NATO solidarity. We stand together in this time of crisis. The people of Ukraine are fighting bravely against the brutal and unprovoked Russian invasion. We utterly condemn the Kremlin's war. Allies are imposing severe costs on Russia through sanctions. We are increasing NATO presence across the alliance to deter and to defend. And we are stepping up our support to help Ukraine defend itself. NATO allies are sending Ukraine anti-tank weapons, air defense missiles and ammunition. Allies are also providing millions of euros worth of financial help and humanitarian aid. I commend Estonia and the United Kingdom for the assistance you are providing to Ukraine. Over the last weeks, in response to Russia's attack on Ukraine, we have increased our defensive presence in the air, on land and at sea, with over 100 jets at high alert operating from 30 different locations, and over 120 ships from the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean. The UK, the US and other allies are deploying thousands more troops to the eastern part of the alliance. For the first time in our history, we are deploying the NATO response force. Because there must be no doubt, no room for miscalculation or misunderstanding. Our commitment to Article 5 of the Washington Treaty is ironclad. We will protect and defend every inch of NATO territory. Credible deterrence prevents conflict and preserves peace. NATO is a defensive alliance. We do not seek conflict with Russia. Our message to President Putin is: stop the war, pull out all your forces from Ukraine, and engage in good faith in diplomatic efforts. The world stands with Ukraine in calling for peace. So, Kaya and Boris, it's great to be with you here again, and we stand together in the alliance, united in our condemnation of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Thank you. We are now at your disposal for questions. Please state your name and media organization you are representing and to whom the question is addressed to. Please use microphone. My colleague will assist.
Hello, I am Katrin Aarma from Estonian television. I have a question to Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Your country has supported volunteers who are ready to fight on the ground in Ukraine. What do you think, under which circumstances should NATO get directly involved in fighting in Ukraine?
Well, thank you very much. And look, I'm going to be very clear about this because you're not quite right in what you say about supporting volunteers going to fight on the ground. The UK is not actively doing such a thing. But I understand, of course, the feelings of people who feel emotionally engaged in this conflict, because I cannot think of a time in international affairs when the difference between right and wrong, between good and bad, between good and evil has been so obvious. And it is clear that the people of Ukraine have right on their side, and I can understand why people feel as they do. But we have laws in our country about international conflicts and how they must be conducted. And on your point, as both Kaja and Jens have stressed, NATO is a defensive alliance. I think for any NATO member to get involved actively in conflict with Russia is a is a huge step which is not being contemplated by any member, and you would have to go to parliaments and to peoples to get agreement for such a step. That is not on the agenda. What is on the agenda is offering the humanitarian support that we are offering, the logistical, the defensive but lethal military support that we are, and we're offering it in ever-growing quantities, but also the economic pressure that the West is now.
We were listening into that joint presser being delivered by the UK Prime Minister, the Estonian Prime Minister, as well as the NATO chief.